I hope that the Council will move ahead in parallel so that we can land under this term. So thank you to the negotiating team and to the rapporteur for this very important exchange of views. We move now to the second discussion we have this morning regarding CLP, which is another big one. So we start with the rapporteur, Maria Spiraki for the EPP.
Merci Pascal, merci Monsieur le Président. Today, colleagues, we exchange on the revision of classification, labeling and packaging regulation, which is in place since 2008 and worked well for the single market for chemicals, ensuring a high level of protection of our citizens and the environment. Needless to say that the situation has already changed and we need an ambitious revision as the proposal of the Commission has already drafted. One of the novelties of the new legislative proposal is the addition of new hazard classes for chemical substances. This initiative has triggered by scientific evidence supporting the fact that harmful substances and mixtures were not fully addressed via the existing criteria, so we need to update these kind of criteria. And therefore, the Commission Delegated Act introduced in the new CLP regulation new hazard classes and criteria for classifying substances and mixtures, just to recall the endocrine disruptions, also the persisting bioaccumulative and toxics, and very persisting and very bioaccumulative toxics, and also persisting mobile and toxic, and very persistent and very mobile toxic. Allow me first of all to this point to clarify my position. My approach is to keep the delegated act as it is proposed and not to reopen it. It is an outcome of negotiations with the Commission and stakeholders, and since it is acceptable from all these sides, I think that we have to proceed with the existing proposal from the Delegated Act without reopening it. The Commission's proposal for CLP is a good starting place for our discussion. However, there are certain room for further improvement of the proposal by keeping some current best practices, aligning better with the needs of the European citizens and the industry as well, providing classification where needed and make it more efficient and implementable. From our side, it is of utmost importance to update the current CLP regulation with a focus to ensure the safety for the consumers, increase the level of the environmental protection, ensure a smooth transition period for the market, and do not distract the market of the essential oil sector, which is including agriculture, SMEs and big industries in various member states, starting from France, dear President, but also Spain, Italy, Poland, Bulgaria, and my home country, Greece. In this regard, and based on the priorities that I have already presented to my proposal, I would like to bring on board the following consideration for deliberation, which are also mirroring in my proposal. First, it is the grouping process, which should be significantly robust, coherent and transparent for all stakeholders. Therefore, I consider that there is a need for clear and transparent criteria for the grouping of chemical substances, and I suggest the development of an ECHA guidance that clarifies the scientific basis from which a harmonized classification for a group of substances can be derived. In the draft report, I have also support that any grouping approach in a proposal for harmonized classification and labelling should be justified on the basis of the criteria to be developed by the agency, the ECHA I mean. Regarding the hazards classification, it has been proposed the implementation of the weight of evidence, which is also important, that could give due to consideration to all available information, irrespectively of possibilities for direct comparison with the criteria. I consider that the assessment of hazard profiles should be carried out in a weight of evidence manner, in order to give priority to actual robust experimental data. Where more comprehensive and more refined data are available for the assessment of substances, these data should be used in the hazard classification process to avoid false negative as well as false positive results. Otherwise, safe substances could be considered as hazardous and banned from the use in the EU under chemical legislation relying to CLP, and putting the competitiveness of the EU producers at stake. And this is of paramount importance that the legislation should also consider inter alia the specificities of essential oils and lubricants, including their characters as substances with the variable composition and concentration of their classification. It is also important to take into account the assumption that the natural complex substances explain that there are not intentional mixes and therefore would not be considered as multi-constituent substances according to the new definition of 7A introduced in Article 2 of the CLP legislative proposal from the Commission. Taking into consideration the lack of data, particularly when it comes to the essential oils, a derogation is needed according to my proposal. By this derogation, this also avoids additional bureaucratic burdens, support the local jobs, traditional production and regular economies of various member states. I have already mentioned them, but I would like to repeat. It is France, it is Bulgaria, it is Spain, it is Italy, it is Poland, and also my home country, Greece, and generally the competitiveness of the European essential oils industry. The definition proposed by the Commission of multi-constituent substances, a substance that contains more than one constituent for those with they are not familiar, is different from the definition provided in the guidance for identification and naming for substances under the existing REACH. I underline this because it could create a huge confusion. Therefore, I propose to delete the definition of multi-constituent substances. I hope that you share my concern at that point, and I will agree with my proposal. It is very critical for me. The MOX, the so-called MOX, should be identified under the revision of REACH, the upcoming revision of REACH. We put a lot of pressure to the Commission to start with the proposal, and after classified under the revised of REACH, under the revision of REACH, we can use CLP. Therefore, the deletion of the definition of MOX is also supported by various stakeholders, not only cosmetics, but also a lot of SMEs from different sectors in our economy, like the European lubricants industry. Considering the reference to animal testing, I consider that the Commission has to ensure before introducing new hazard classes or classification criteria that the new envisaged classes of criteria can be fully satisfied with existing data and they are aligned with the Commission's and our EU goal for fully replacing animal testing. Going to labelling, supporting the Commission objectives about the labelling, it is important to create more flexibility. And that's why I propose the use of fault-out labels as shown in the amendments to Article 29. Including this corresponding reference to fault-out labels, we have to ensure consistency and clarity for economic operators and member states' competent authorities. At this point, I would like also to enhance the mandatory use of digital labelling that will be based on the technological progress and taking into account societal needs. Regarding the issue of the transition period, we have also to grant sufficient time for all actors in the supply chain to update their labels and to sustainably exhaust their stocks. For that reason, I propose the extension of the transition period to 18 months instead of 6, it is in the initial text. Regarding the advertisement requirements and the online sales, I would like to highlight that the revised regulation should ensure a level playing field for the online sales. In addition, what is included in the Commission proposals, I would also to add that when products are directed to the general public, we have to secure fair for our citizens' health and the environment. For this reason, I propose that in online offers and investments, the request to user always read and follow product label information, which is very important and it is a warning sign. I would like to conclude with the issue of the resources to ECHA, since the revision of this regulation expands the tasks of ECHA by having to provide adequate expertise, support and thorough evaluation, I support that the resources of agency should be enhanced under a separate budgetary line. I would like once again to thank the Commission and also our colleagues, shadow rapporteurs, and I'm waiting for their proposals. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we move now to the shadows, starting with the SND and Delara Burkhardt replacing João Albuquerque.
Yes, I will fill in for João Albuquerque, starting with thanking you for your draft report. Our S&D priority is that CLP needs to provide all the necessary information to the consumers and to ensure the protection of human health and the environment. And we are afraid that several proposals are really undermining the proposal of the Commission, and we will raise these points under the negotiations. In particular, we have concerns regarding the multi-constituent substances, where we are fully aware about the concerns raised by the essential oil sector, and we are ready to take them into account. At the same time, for us, it's clear that if there are toxicological concerns associated with these substances, they should be properly regulated and consumers should be fully informed. And we see the proposal of the Commission allowing for derogations under certain circumstances as a good basis, and we will propose amendments that will hopefully help bridging those different positions. Concerning labelling, when there is a change of classification towards a more severe class, industries must have a duty to update these labels in a shorter period to inform consumers of the risk. In the same way, information on the label needs to be easily legible for all. On this point, we disagree with the proposal to delete the elements of the current guidance that the Commission is proposing. We don't only have concerns, we will also make some extra proposals in our amendments where we think there is a hole right now in the report, which is first of all the inclusion of the new hazard classes, which is missing in some articles of the legal text where we will propose to fix that. We also want to be careful regarding which information might be provided only through digital labeling, and will propose amendments to ensure that crucial information is not more difficult to access for consumers. And we should also push for greater prioritization of classification and labeling of groups and substances, and for what we want to give a clear priority to grouping in the legal text. And finally, we welcome the addition on obligations for the sales of chemicals in refill stations. However, we think that some additions are necessary to ensure the information and the safety of consumers. Specifically, some hazard classes should be added to the list of classes that cannot be sold in the refill stations, and the consumers should always have access to a label in the form of a sticker that they can affix on their container to be able to access information about the substance they are buying all the time and not only at the time of purchasing. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin Osik for Renew.
Thank you, dear Rapporteur, dear Maria. First, let me start by thanking you for the draft report. It will be my pleasure, as usual, to work with you on this important legislation, although we might have some different opinions on several issues. We support the Commission proposal as a good starting base and a reflection of the long-term European Parliament's position on the topic of chemicals of concern. Now, we need to ensure that all the hazardous chemicals, from ECDs to PMTs, and the property which have these properties, are classified adequately, uniformly and timely throughout the European Union. Honestly, I do not really see the risk of overclassification, nor do the assessments from our scientists and experts at ECHA indicate that this would be an issue. Rather to the contrary, what we have as a problem right now is that we have widespread presence of chemicals on our market where the hazardous properties have not been properly characterized and properly labeled. And this is leading to the detriment of consumers, the professional users, the workers, the economic actors, because at the end of the supply chain, suddenly you end up with a product where it contains other chemicals, someone tests it, but you had no idea. And especially the SMEs in the supply chain, these are negatively impacted by the lack of information on the substances they are exposed to, they're exposing their workers to. Therefore, we believe that the new CLP should lead towards more efficient and faster classification to meet its objectives of protection of health and environment. Our current hazard classification system is based on the individual substances, but it's slow. Under-classification of hazard is very common, and this should be rather rare, but yet it's way more the norm. Now, this is why we believe that grouping should be used by default whenever scientifically justified. We believe the CLP should remain science-based on the chemical's intrinsic properties. It's about whether, something causes cancer or not. And therefore, we need to have a clear separation of hazard assessment and hazard classification on one hand, so the risk assessment committee, and the risk assessment and management on the other hand, but there are other parts of the chemical legislation that are looking at the risk assessment. This is really about the labeling of the hazards. Therefore, we need to strengthen these and not undermine them. We believe that the digitalization innovations offer great possibilities and should be enhanced, but to improve the transparency and communication of the information, not the other way. Therefore, we believe the crucial information like signal words, hazards, or precautionary statement should be always clearly visible at sight. Not everybody is digitally skilled yet, and therefore we should prevent the discrimination of citizens or making them to pose danger to each other with using chemicals that they cannot see the label properly. Last but not least, we cannot make it more cumbersome for consumers to access the information when purchasing or using a product. Now, very final additional point, animal testing. This is something which indeed is a really big concern of mine, something I've been trying to help to minimize over the years in my professional career. But what we also need to do is not to forget that it should not be used as an excuse not to know, not to have the data. Yes, we can do better. We can do more to share data, prevent unnecessary testing, work on non-animal methods, but we cannot use it as an excuse to not protect the health and environment, because let's be honest, hazardous chemicals are harming not only humans, but animals alike. And therefore, we need to ensure that we have the data and we are aware of where the hazards are. Looking forward to the discussions and on all these aspects, and I'm hoping that at the end the Parliament will really have a good and strong positions for the negotiation with Council. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to Ita Paulus for the Greens.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Maria, for your report. I think there is already a great deal of questions which have been addressed by my colleagues, and I'm looking forward to the negotiations, and I will, as always, enjoy working with you. We as group, we of course appreciate the new hazard classes that were brought forward in the Delegated Act to the current CLP, and I think it is really high time that these really dangerous properties are properly recognized in the legislation. We support the Commission's proposal, which was brought forward in very large parts. I think that we need clear criteria, obligations and timelines in order to protect our workers and our citizens from chemical hazards. I agree with my colleagues that the definition of mixture or MOX, more than one constituent substances, is unclear and in some parts contradictory to the current legislation in REACH, which is, of course, the superseding legislation. And I'm happy to work on a good wording here, which gives certainty to the industry and also to the downstream users, which are at the moment really confused on what they have to do, what labels do they have to apply, do they have to do testing themselves? So there is really a lot of confusion and also fear around that, especially the SMEs might be overburdened with additional tasks. So I think that we will have to find some better wording here. But the CLP is about hazards and not risks. And we should not throw the baby out with the bathwater by saying, well, never mind about the multi-constituent substances, because the Commission themselves have found out that currently the MOX are well, under REACH, they are quite well defined, and especially when it comes to CMR substances, carcinogenic, mutagenic, or reproduction toxic, that labeling is not always done in a clear and consistent manner. And certainly I will not have it that citizens are exposed to these dangerous substances just because there is, let's say, room for interpretation in the definition of MOX. So we have to make sure that we properly protect our citizens here. And then generally speaking, of course, we will need quicker processes, especially for the Commission, because ECHA are doing their job when it comes to assessing the properties of chemicals, and RAC and CIOC opinions are quite quick, but the Commission is sometimes a bit slow to proceed. So I think we should also set deadlines in the legislation in order to make sure that these processes are not unduly delayed. Last but not least, on animal testing, this is not the subject of this regulation, actually. This regulation is about classification, labeling, and packaging. It's not about animal testing. And of course, I'm happy to push and to work for quick acknowledgement of alternative testing methods in the legislation where it belongs, and then we can refer to this legislation. But let's not try to mix up different legislative texts in order to work towards less animals being used in the testing of chemicals. But the solution can also not be not to test on anything. Not using animals to test means using live humans to test for the properties of a chemical. That cannot be our goal. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to ECR and Pietro Fiocchi.
I start fully agreeing with Jutta with the last things you said about animal testing. You know, I'm a hunter, so I kill animals, but on the other hand, I fully agree that it's horrible to use animals for testing cosmetics or something else. So unless there is a proven proof that we need to do testing on some type of medical facility to save human life, I think animal testing should be killed in Europe. Sorry to say that, but I agree with Jutta. A few points, very fast. You know, I agree that the work of Maria has been very good, very comprehensive. I need to warn that you know, labeling is a difficult topic, especially for the SMEs. Obviously, you know, once you get into the problem in which you want to put, you know, animal welfare information, CO2 emission information, this and that and that and that, you know, 99.9% of the shoppers do not care about that. And especially if you multiply that by the fact that you need to have the language of the country where you sell your product and so on, so 27 languages, I would push very hard to have a QR code to give all this information. Obviously, it is important that if you are a celiac or if you have any kind of important allergies, you get the warning right away on the packaging. But all the rest of the information should be available, but only if you really want to see it. Sorry to say that, okay? Regarding the work of ECA is doing an excellent work. We need to be careful to start banning everything, because in some cases banning of chemical substances is a good idea. In some other cases, it's not such a good idea, because there are a lot of consequences on the economy and jobs. So now there are some substances which are dangerous from a chemical point of view, but which are perfectly taken care of in the industry. So once you are in a situation like that, I think it's stupid to ban them. I take, for example, a reference to lead. Lead is obviously a dangerous chemical substance. It's in the authorization list of REACH, but we took it away from gasoline, which was an extremely good idea. But on the other hand, banning lead has killed a lot of other industry making, for example, windows. It's incredible, because lead is used as a lubricant. So we need to be careful and have a very good assessment from an environmental point of view, but also from an economic and a job point of view. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move to Mr. Loncini for ID. I can't see him. Okay, so we move to Anja Azekamp for the left. And before Anja, sorry, I open the Catch the Eye if you want to put yourself on the list.
Ja, dank u wel, voorzitter. Een hartelijk dank aan mevrouw Spiraki.
Thank you very much to Mrs. Spiraki for this draft report. The strategy is a pillar of the Green Pact, and in this resolution, as Parliament, we were strongly in favour of increasing the new hazard classes, particular for endocrine disruptors and for the PBT substances. And so it's now our job to ensure that we strengthen this act which will regulate this issue. This is one of the promises of the strategy, and this is becoming concrete through this document right now. And I know that Mrs. Spiraki, just like myself, it's very important to us to carry out this review to ensure that we can strengthen these points. And I think that during our negotiations we will be able to work well together. We have a lot to say, it's true. The rapporteur is also planning proposals to try to see what can be done about the financial health as well as the human health and environmental health of the stakeholders. So the starting point, according to Mrs. Spiraki, is that all forms of pollution should be avoided. We should avoid any kind of damage to human health, public health and environment. Therefore, we have to look at the major role of the classification of substances, and as the things stand, I cannot subscribe to this proposal. We need to further strengthen the role of the ECHA agency to ensure that we can enshrine their role even more into law. Now, through this regulation, we'll also have the possibility of revising our classification methods. This is very important also. And in many cases, we see that the proposal for test methods are far more minutious than, more detailed than, for example, tests on mice and so on. So these new approaches and methodologies, whether it be in vivo or others, in using organs or whatever it may be, there are a whole host of new technologies, new methods which are available to us, and so we should focus on that issue too. I'm very pleased that the rapporteur has already thought about this and has thought about how we can get rid of this animal testing. Now, as regards including a new mechanism to provide for tests which have already been approved by virtue of other legislative acts, we will be trying to ensure that these are in compliance with the CLP. And what we also need to ensure is that there's greater visibility for products which have used animal testing. So we need to make those products more visible. I will be working on a measure to that end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So for the Catch the Eye, we have only one name, Mr. Polčák. The floor is yours.
Děkuji, pane předsedo. Já bych chtěl poděkovat.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I would like to
thank you very much
for a very good report. I would also like to thank the Commission for a robust proposal that we have long waited for. In my opinion, right classification of chemicals is key, as well as labeling hazards is key. But on the other hand, this is about the entire competitiveness of the European Union and of certain sectors of our economy. I think we can't underestimate the whole labeling scheme. Today, we have a very robust legislation on this, but we care for the consumer's health, for employees' health, and trust in the system matters much to us. Revision of the system is necessary. I think the rapporteur is going in the right direction, and our goal should be to avoid all pollution in an ideal world. And I will table some amendments about digital accessibility of the labels, about transparency to consumers, and about raising awareness of the situation of the SMEs, because sometimes they really get lost in the current system. So simplification of the system is the main goal for me, as well as avoiding the impact of pollution on our environment. But simplification of the system is the most important thing, and thank you very much for the proposal, and I will table some amendments, as I have already said. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we move now to the Commission. Mr. Superior again.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank the honourable members of this committee, and in particular MEP Spiraki, for the work done and for the support whom they lent to this legislative proposal of the Commission. We are in particular grateful to MEP Spiraki for her long-standing support and for her hard work in preparing the report, and for the fact that the report creates a solid basis for sound revision of the classification, labeling and packaging of chemical substances regulation. We are grateful for the support we have heard from shadow rapporteurs and from other honourable members of this committee. However, and we, of course, Mr. Chair, I would like to emphasize this, that we assume that all these suggestions for change are thoroughly reflected upon by the proponents of them. And we are convinced that there are more than one angle which have been examined when looking at these proposals. And the Commission does not assume that only its own opinions and views are the right ones. But we respectfully draw the attention of the honourable members of this home to different perspectives and different implications which may result, sometimes without intention even, if certain things are operated. So while we wholeheartedly welcome the overwhelming majority of the suggestions from the rapporteur, we would like to bring to your attention that a number of amendments go in a direction which would undermine the effectiveness which is intended by the legislative proposal to amend the CLP regulation. The first, there are about 3 or 4 elements, so really not a lot of divergences. One of them concerns the issue of the multi-constituent substances. Let me recall the background for the Commission's proposal. First of all, it reflects current practice as classifying multi-constituent substances for certain hazards based on its constituents is included in ECHA's guidance. But not only that, also the current provisions of Article 10, paragraph 1 and Article 11, paragraph 1 of the regulation states those principles, which should now be clarified in Article 5. You will have noted that the Commission's proposal provides a possibility to exempt multi-constituent substances from the general classification rule based on the constituents. That is a sense of the reference to Annex 1 we have proposed. This annex can be amended if there is a sufficient scientific evidence that warrants a classification of the substance as a whole. The second series of amendments on which we would like to draw the attention of the members of this committee is related to the involvement of ECHA's socio-economic committee in the harmonized classification and labeling procedure. The current text of the regulation only involves the risk assessment committee, which does such scientific assessment, as opposed to REACH, which includes a socio-economic committee as well as the risk assessment committee. It is clear that the CLP regulation is about hazard assessments. The decisions are of a scientific nature and do not require economic or other impacts to be assessed, which is done under other legislations. In other words, Mr. Chair and Honourable Rapporteur and members of this committee, to put it in a more succinct way, it is important to focus on the protection of humans and on the environment, and thereafter only consider the economic implications. The health considerations are primary on the topic matter for discussion. A third amendment on which we would like to draw the attention of the members of this committee is a possibility for industry to go directly to ECHA to review existing harmonized classification and labeling of a substance without passing via the agreement of a member state, who are acting today as a filter to avoid an avalanche of industry requests. Allowing such procedure will lead to additional workload for ECHA and its risk assessment committee. Having said this, Mr. Chair, and perfectly aware that the Commission is represented on the revision of the CLP and of the REACH regulation by two services of the Commission, not one, sign of the importance of this legislative chantier. So I have here with me my colleague Hans Ingels, who represents DG GROW, and you may wish to give him the floor. But before kindly ask you to share the floor with my colleague, I would like to comment also on the controversial, we acknowledge, issue of the animal testing. And I would like to echo and express my gratitude to MEP Hoysik, who is a connoisseur of the area, and to MEP Paulus, who is no longer with us, for their comments about the striking the right balance between using animal testing and protecting human health. Yes, the Commission remains committed to phasing out progressively as far as technology and science allow us to do, the reliance on animal testing. But this should not be an excuse for not sufficiently protecting humans. This is why I would like to express our concern about the amendment which is related to the Amendment 11, related to the prohibition to require evidence from any animal testing to fulfill the CLP classification criteria in future revisions. We would urge the honourable members of this committee to further reflect on the need not to introduce additional rigidity elements that would make that would prevent this regulation working for people. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we move to your colleague from DG GROW. I don't have your name on my list. Sorry for this.
Thank you. My name is Hans Ingels. I'm the head of unit and deputy director in DG GROW. I will be brief. First of all, we appreciate the work done by the rapporteur and by this committee on, and the personal investment also of this committee in this legislative proposal. We also highly appreciate the position that you've taken on the Delegated Act, because indeed the Delegated Act is one of the ambitious deliverables of the chemical strategy. And it's also a response to many requests of this Parliament on the new hazard classes. I will only say that the two main objectives of our proposal are, on the one hand, have a better protection of consumers and the environment, and on the other hand, to ensure also a better functioning single market, because CLP is a single market instrument. And so, therefore, we look very much forward to working with you and with the rapporteur on, and with the members of this committee on a proposal that will achieve both objectives. And also, we would like to ask this committee also to ensure that together we have a fast first reading agreement still under this legislature, and we will help you with all our technical expertise and with all our possibilities to achieve this agreement still under this legislature. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Back to you, Maria.
Merci, Pascal. Well, I think that it is very, very important to have a very good start, and in this regard, I will start commenting on the proposals coming from the Commission, particularly concerning these 4 amendments. The first one, when it comes to MOX, I think that we can all agree that we have to stick on the remit of our report, and particularly on CLP. It is not on the remit of CLP, the definitions, and it is on the remit of REACH, the definitions. So it is important to have a very clear definition when an update and a revised definition when it comes to MOX coming from REACH. And it is not the problem of this House, and it is not the problem of the chair, of the rapporteur, of many colleagues here in this House, that REACH is not in the pipeline, and REACH is not the first in this kind of legislation that we are examining. We ask for this. We put a lot of pressure for this. We send a letter to the President of the Commission of this, and we don't have any kind of outcome to this quarter of the period that we are working. So it is important not to increase the confusion in the market. It is important also to clarify that REACH is responsible for registration. In this regard, that's why I insist on the issue of MOX. And I insist on the issue of MOX because CLP is what the acronym is saying. It's saying classification, labeling, and packaging. Starting from classification, I also insist, and I think it is very important for all of us, not to reopen the delegated act. It is an outcome coming from negotiation between different stakeholders and the Commission, so we have a very solid and acceptable basis to build upon. The second one is concerning on the ECA. Yes, I fully agree with you that we have to reduce the impact of this kind of amendment, and I'm very open to negotiate on the issue of involving other committees of ECA than the one that it is fully responsible for CLP. Third, it is the possibility of the additional workload when it comes to the direct way from the industry to ECA. I think that we have to consider that it is not the period that one industry, one firm has a basis only in a member state, when an industry, one firm has a basis only in the EU. So it is important to increase the flexibility, and that's why at the parallel level we are asking for a separate line budget for ECA, and we are asking for increasing the resources in order to address the new need. Last but not least, the issue of phasing out of animal testing. We all agree here in this House that it's not on the remit of CLP, but it is also important to have reliable data. In this regard, I think that the amendment is a good base to start negotiating with, and I appreciate very much the approach coming from my colleagues from the Renew, Greens, and also from the left in this regard. Going to the last but not least, I will refer to the point of the representative of the Commission of DG GROW. It is now time to proceed with CLP. And it is now time to conclude CLP during this term. So we have the basis, we have the spirit to compromise. I insist that I'm quite open to all of you and of course to the Commission. And I insist also that my previous life here in this House is setting in the center. So please go on with this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we all hope that and we'll make the maximum to close this file as many others under this term. So thank you. Before moving to the timetable, there is a very short request from Anja Hazekamp.
Yes, thank you, Pascal. I was just informed that the English translation did not reflect the content of my speech. I just want to say that I will make sure that through my amendments, my position will be clarified. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So next time, make it in English. It will be easier. So deadlines for amendments, 11th of May at 5 p.m. And the vote in ENVI September to be confirmed precisely. Thank you to the team.